The Glock Model 30 versus the Model 30S. Let's check it out. The Glock Model 30 is in 45 ACP, and it's part of their large frame series, but this is their compact pistol. The Model 30 is the baby brother to the Model 21, which holds 13+1. The Model 30 holds 10+1. So it's a very small, compact gun. In fact, it's actually a little smaller than the Glock 19, but a little larger than the Model 26 in 9mm. One thing about the Glocks though, especially the large frame, is they are thick. They are very thick, and the slide's thick, the frame's thick. I mean, it just makes a very thick gun, and for me, making it thin is what I want when I'm carrying concealed. So recently I picked up a Model 30S. I'll just be honest, I didn't know that there was a 30S, and this has been out for a number of years. This takes a much thinner slide of the Glock Model 36, which is a single stack Glock, and it puts it on the Model 30 frame. But there are some other differences. So we're going to take a look at both. We're going to compare them. One of the things that I was most interested in was the recoil. With that heavier slide, is it going to help with recoil? Or with the thinner slide, does it give it less slide mass? Lighter slide, easier coming back. And so we're going to check that out as well. But if you've never heard of the Model 30S, it's a pretty sweet option for 45 ACP, and yet it gives you 10+1. The guys over at Glock actually sent the Model 30S for this review, and I bought and paid for it before it got here. I really wanted to find one of these, and honestly that was the only way I could get one, is to get in touch with Glock. Alright guys, we have the Glock Model 30 and we have the Model 30S. There are some differences between these two that are pretty significant, but one thing they both share in common is they have a 10+1 round capacity. Now there are some 9-round magazines that were made for the Glocks. Those are fairly rare to find. Mainly you'll see the 10-round magazines. But this is in 45 ACP. This is their compact version. The full size is the Model 21, and this one holds 13+1. It is a full-size gun. But these are small, but yet they're fairly thick. And that's one of the things about the large frame Glocks is they are thick. So if you thought the Glock 19 was thick, because some people call it the block, you put in the Model 30 and it's a huge difference. Now, one of the things about the Gen 4, you can get back straps for it that'll extend the grip. With the Gen 3, it comes just as it is, but this is the short frame version. And what it means is the distance between right here at the web of your hand and your trigger finger, this is shorter than your original Glock Model 30 or 30S. And so this just gives you a more comfortable grip, a little bit easier to get to the trigger. And that's the big thing about the SF model. And really the Gen 4 just mimicked that SF without the back strap. Now let's go ahead and make sure that the guns are unloaded. Again, 10-round magazine, check the chamber. And again, 10-round magazine, chamber's empty. The magazines are interchangeable. They're honestly the same magazines. So it does have a little bit of an extended base plate, which you'll notice it doesn't have just that flush base plate. There's a little bit of a space right here as far as thickness. So guys, these guns again are very comparable, but one of the biggest differences you're going to notice is the slide. The Model 30's on top. It is considerably thicker than your Model 30S. This is more in the profile of your Glock Model 36, which is a single stack 45 ACP. Only holds 6 rounds. But this gives you that smaller slide, and yet it gives you more capacity. And so that was one of the big things. It's almost like a hybrid between the 36 and the Model 30. And so the 30S just has that much thinner profile slide. Now, what are the big differences there? One of the big reasons is because you have more slide mass on your Model 30. So typically you'll have more slide mass coming back, which will lead to more recoil. Now, you may argue that, we've got a little bit of a heavier pistol because this slide is going to be a little heavier, or the lighter pistol with the lighter weight and the thinner profile. The one thing about the 30S is it's just going to be a lighter handgun, and it is. The slide is considerably the heaviest part of this pistol, and man, it does, just in our hands. And we'll weigh them in just a minute. The barrel's 3.77 inches, so it's a little bit shorter than the Glock 19 barrel, but not as small as the Glock 26. Of course, the Gen 3 texturing is that muted kind of texturing with the pyramids in the back and the front. With the Gen 4, and actually even with the Gen 5, we've gone more to a pyramid, real cut-off shape here. Gives you a lot more texturing right here in the side of the grip, and even here on the back strap. Now, on the Gen 4, they retained their finger grooves. On Gen 5s now, there's no finger grooves. But the Model 30 has not come out in the Gen 5 at this time. So we're getting just the finger grooves on either one of these, and so it's just part of what Glock is making right now. Slide serrations are pretty much the same. The slide itself, these two have different finishes, and it comes from Glock's evolution of putting different type finishes on their handguns. The Model 30 has a little more sheen to it. The Model 30S has more of a matte finish to it, and honestly this came directly from Glock like we talked about, and this is a really late production pistol, so not really sure if they're going more toward this matte finish. This is honestly the first time I've really seen it this matte. Usually, I mean, it is kind of almost a satin finish to their pistols with that, what originally was Tenifer finish, but then they've kind of changed that because of some of the health issues. Now, of course, you have your Glock Picatinny rail or section, and it's just one slot. It's the same with both. And pretty much, I mean, all the controls are the same. Your slide stop, your mag release, which the Gen 4 has a larger mag release. With the Gen 3, you have a more of abbreviated mag release. As far as the triggers, we've got those same Glock safe action triggers with the blade safety shoe right here. And we have our trigger guards are pretty much the same. Takedown levers here are the same. One thing that I've always noticed though with some of the large frame Glocks is it's a little more difficult to get to your takedown levers. It's one of the reasons why I add one of the trapezoid slide locks from Brass Stacker. It just comes out a little bit, and yet it doesn't add any width. And that's just one of the things I like to do. Again, overall, sight compatibility is the same, everything. Let's weigh out the Glock 30. 26.6 ounces. The Glock Model 30S. 23 ounces. Guys, a considerable difference. Now, another big advantage of the Model 30S is that it'll fit into Glock 19 magazines. Here we have a Glock 19 mag polymer. It locks in beautifully. And of course, again, it was made for the 19. But with the way that the grip is, it doesn't interfere with the polymer. Now, there may be some. If it has something to do with the thickness of the grip, it could. Here we have a leather inside the waistband holster, and it's for the Glock 19, and it works as well. With the Glock Model 30, it's not going. Now, I mean, I could force it maybe, but it's going to scratch up the slide, and it just doesn't fit. Even with this bigger one. I can get it started, but again, the Model 30 is on its own. When it goes to the 30S, you're going to have a few more options. But there are going to be some Model 19 holsters that the 30S are not going to work in, and this is one of them. This is a G-code holster. These are excellent holsters, good retention. And because this is made to such a form that fits to the pistol, you're going to have a little more issues when it comes to putting in your Model 30S. So you're going to have some compatibility, but you're possibly going to have some that just aren't going to work. Now, as far as the difference between the Glock 19, which is one of Glock's most popular, if not the most popular selling Glock out there, we do have a little bit of an extension of the barrel, but honestly, it's not much. And then, of course, at the bottom, we have 15+1 of 9mm, 10 of 45 ACP. So it gives you just a little bit longer grip. And guys, I measured the width of the slide, and they are identical. It's just the same exact width. Now, we'll take the 30S and put it down. Let's check out the Glock 30. A considerable difference with the Glock 19 and the Glock 30, which we expected. But everything else should be the same as the Glock 30S. And here with the full-size Model 21. I mean, it is quite a bit bigger with the Glock 21. Of course, it's a full-size pistol. And again, it does hold 13 rounds. So you have 3 additional rounds full grip. But one thing about the Model 21, the magazines will interchange with the Model 30 and 30S. So now I have 13 rounds. Now I do have a hangover, but I hadn't even been drinking. But I do get a little bit of a hangover here. But it does give you that larger capacity. The Glock trigger, I mean, these two are pretty much the same. We have that little safety right there on the trigger. And so as we pull it back, it hits a wall. And then it just has kind of a Glock spongy feeling. And that's just typical for Glocks. Reset, fairly quick, nice reset. But of course there are a lot of aftermarket triggers out there which really can improve the Glock trigger, but both of these I've tested them a few times and they're pretty much the same. And typically Glock triggers are rated about the 5 to 5.5 pound range. And we really appreciate Fiocchi for sponsoring our ammo, all made in the USA. One of the #1 suppliers of ammo in the country. And also we appreciate Lula Loaders for saving our thumbs. These little mags, when it gets down to those last rounds, they're tough. We're going to start out with the Model 30. This is the full slide. Just want to get a feel for the serrations. Model 30, I've been shooting these for a long time. Let's go with the Model 30S, SF for short frame. Yeah, it's actually a little bit easier to manipulate. Your thumbs are a little bit closer together, but not really that big of a deal. There's less slide coming back, less slide mass. I have to say this is a little softer shooting, and we'll look at the recoil system when we get inside, but a little bit less on the barrel too. So overall, pretty sweet shooting little gun. Let's try do a little rapid. Here we've got the Model 30. It's not a lot, but it's definitely there. I mean, I can feel the difference between the two. I think one thing too with these two pistols is the grip. The Gen 4 grip is a little better. I mean, it's got more texturing to it. The Gen 3 style is pretty slick. You know, it's fairly decent to hold on to, but not anywhere near the Gen 4. So to me, that should actually have more control over the pistol. So really, side to side, if these were both Gen 3s, you know, it may be even more felt recoil with the Model 30. But I'm just guessing. But it seems to reason because this grip is not super aggressive. Yeah, less recoil with the 30S. Now for disassembly, and this is where we have a few more differences. We're going to check. Go ahead and pull the trigger in a safe direction, pull back on your slide about 1/4 of an inch and take down your takedown tabs, and then the slide comes right off. Same thing, pull your trigger, pull back about 1/8 of an inch and pull down. Pull out your dual recoil spring and guide rod, barrel comes right out. Okay, same process for both. Now let's look at some differences. First, we have our recoil spring. Pretty much the same exact design. Even toward the front, everything's the same, even though these are both Gen 3 and Gen 4. Sometimes on some of the Gen 4s, they have a different type recoil spring system. Of course, the barrels look very similar, and the profile's about the same. But one of the biggest differences is right here. The Glock Model 30 is on the left, and it has a smaller diameter on the outside of the barrel. You can see a little bit more thickness with the barrel on the right, which is the Glock Model 30. And two, if we're going to try to put this into a slide, it will not go into the Model 30S slide. And then with your Glock Model 30S barrel, it goes in, but there is a lot of play. So that is definitely the biggest difference between the interiors, is that the barrel has a little bit less outer diameter for your Glock 30S. But honestly, everything else is pretty much the same. And definitely with the interior of the frames. And that's all that needs to be done to field strip. We're just going to go ahead and reassemble the Glock Model 30. The Glock Model 30S is the exact same way to reassemble. And it goes on really easy. Now the barrel diameter definitely has a lot to do with the thickness of your slide on the Model 30S. It's thinner, and you're starting to get a little bit of loss of strength toward around the edges. So that's the reason why this barrel on the right is a little bit thicker, because it has a thicker slide. But it's funny, one of the things we're seeing a lot of are these 9mm that are full capacity 9s, and yet they have a very thin profile. And to be honest, I think that that's one of the things that Glock did with their Model 36, was they came in with a thinner slide that still could take the pressures of a 45 ACP. And so now we're seeing a number of companies doing that to really trim down their firearms. Makes them lightweight, makes them easier to handle, and easier to conceal. One of the things about concealed carry is the thinness. Thicker guns are just harder to conceal, especially if you're doing it all day. And so this really gives you a little bit more advantage for concealed carry, because the slide is just a little thinner. All right, let's wrap it up with some pros and cons. Pros, the more beefy slide, it may just be stronger. With the thinner slide, with 45 ACP over a long period of time. But I don't really see that being a problem. I think with Glock engineers, they've designed this to function very well, and so I don't think that's a problem. The grips themselves are still Glock 30 grips. They're thick, and they give you a handful, no doubt. But honestly, shooting these, it's a very much enjoyable firearm to shoot. And so that thickness doesn't really hurt too much. Now, one thing is, if you get one that does not have the SF type frame, then it really gets thick. For my hands, I have medium-sized hands. So if you have large hands, you may enjoy that. I know some guys that actually do prefer the standard version. Now, this, of course, is in the Gen 4. I'm not positive that Glock is making these in Gen 4. The finishes should be pretty much the same if it's in the current time of production. But the big thing is the slide thickness. It's going to be softer shooting. It's going to have a thinner profile when concealed carrying. And that, to me, is probably the biggest part of it. Also, the barrel is a little bit thinner in diameter. So the weight on this is pretty considerable between the two, and I think that's a pro for the 30S. The 30 definitely has just a lot more heft. Great thing is, mostly parts compatibility other really than the barrel. All your internal parts should be the same, and of course magazine compatibility, even going up to your Model 21 13+1 magazine or others. It's 10 rounds of 45 ACP. That is excellent in itself, and so both of those have that. The Model 30S is going to be a little more difficult to come across. I think you're going to see the Model 30 more often than not. So that is a good possibility. But overall, I mean, two great pistols. It's just according to what you like to do. To be honest with you, I shoot the Model 30 extremely well, and I really like the way it shoots. For concealability and for less muzzle rise, I like the Model 30S. So just a number of choices out there. Even though this is a small change for the Model 30, it makes some big differences. So guys, if you like 45 ACP and you want to carry something in a very compact package, the Model 30 and the Model 30S are excellent choices because they have that 10 round capacity, yet they're fairly compact. Now, if you want that smaller slide, the advantages of that, which there are a lot, the Model 30S does give you, to me, less recoil. It makes it easier to put into holsters, and of course, obviously, if you have a Glock 19, this will fit in those holsters. But if you like the thicker slide, if you like that little bit more beefy feel to it, then the Model 30 is the gun for you. The little bit of more texturing on the Glock 30 definitely gives you a little more to grip into your hand. Really, overall, these are two great guns, and honestly, my pick is the Model 30S. But you're going to see a lot more Glock Model 30s out on the market. And again, we really appreciate Glock for helping us out by getting us one of these Model 30S's, and I purchased the Model 30 from a good friend of mine. And so, Glock, love them, and just wanted to kind of run these head to head. Be strong, be of good courage. God bless America, long live the Republic. So really, with the Glock Model 30S, you're getting that more of a Glock 36. I don't even know where I am now. Let's start all over. The Model 30 holds 10+. Really cuts down the thickness of the Glock, the frame, the slide. Oops. Definitely the full size. But before we do that, we're going to weigh it out. I can see clearly now, the rain is gone.